What's up, everyone, and welcome to this week's Cybersecurity Weekly, where we review the security events that happened in the last week. As always, I've broken the stories down in the timeline. There's a list of stories with time markers in the description below, so you can click on any of those time markers to jump around to any story that you want. If you find my work valuable, of course, I ask you to hit the like button and share this episode with anyone you know who can benefit from this information. And lastly, if you have not already, please also consider subscribing to my channel. We start off with Adobe. Adobe released security updates to address multiple vulnerabilities impacting Photoshop, Illustrator, and After Effects for both Windows and macOS users. Adobe addressed 4 critical issues: CVE 2022-24094, 24095, 24096, 24097. Affecting the After Effects products, successful exploitation could lead to arbitrary code execution in the context of the current user. The software giant also addressed a critical buffer overflow issue tracked as CVE 2022-23187 in Illustrator that can lead to arbitrary code execution. The flaw was reported by Kushal Arvind Shah of Fortinet FortiGuard Labs and impacts both Windows and macOS versions of Illustrator 26.0.3 and earlier versions. The company also fixed an important severity flaw, important severity flaw tracked to CVE 2022-24090 in the Photoshop software. The successful exploitation of the flaw in that software could lead to memory leak in the context of the current user. The good news is that the company was not aware of any exploits in the wild for the above vulnerabilities. Microsoft also published its Patch Tuesday security updates for February 2023 that addressed 75 flaws, including 3 actively exploited zero-day bugs. In November 2022, researchers from security firm Sucuri reported to have tracked a surge in WordPress malware redirecting website visitors to fake Q&A sites versus OIS.is. The experts were tracking the campaign since September 2022. The campaign's end goal was black hat SEO aimed at increasing the reputation of the attacker sites. The Sucuri site check detected redirects on over 2,500 sites during September and October, while public www results show nearly 15,000 websites affected by this malware. Now, experts from Sucuri reveal that since September, their site check remote scanner has detected this campaign on 10,893 infected sites. The researchers pointed out that the activity has surged with over 70 new malicious domains masquerading as URL shorteners since January 2023. Over 2,600 or plus, well, over and plus is the same thing, have been detected. The hacked website traffic is redirected to low-quality websites running the question-to-answer CMS. The websites were proposing discussions related to cryptocurrency and blockchain. The main goal of the threat actors is still ad fraud by generating revenues through traffic redirecting to pages containing the AdSense ID used by the threat actors. Now, all of the malicious URLs pretend to look like they belong to some URL shortening service. Some of them even mimic names of reputable URL shorteners like Bitly, according to the analysis published by Sucuri. Now, if you enter any of these domain names in a browser, you'll be redirected to a real URL shortening service, Bitly, Cutly, and shorturl.at, which makes it look like they are just alternative domains for the well-known services. However, they are not really real public URL shorteners. Each of the domains has only a few working URLs that redirect visitors to spammy Q&A sites with prominent AdSense monetization. Recently, the threat actors moved all their domains from Cloudflare to the Russian bulletproof hosting services provider DDoS Guard. All these domains can now be found on IP 190.115.26.9. Unlike previous campaigns, this last one also uses redirects to Bing search results URLs and through Twitter short t.co URLs. Unwanted redirects via fake short URL to fake Q&A sites result in inflated ad views and clicks, and therefore inflated revenue for whomever is behind this campaign. It is one very large and ongoing campaign of organized advertising revenue fraud, continued the analysis. The analysis of the compromised WordPress sites revealed that threat actors have injected backdoor PHP code to achieve traffic redirection and persistence. Apple has released emergency security updates to address a new actively exploited zero-day vulnerability tracked to CVE 2023-23529 that impacts iOS, iPadOS, and macOS. The flaw is a type confusion issue in WebKit that was addressed by the IT giant with improved checks. An attacker can achieve arbitrary code execution by tricking the victims into visiting maliciously crafted web content. Processing maliciously crafted web content may lead to arbitrary code execution. Apple is aware of a report that this issue may have been actively exploited, reads the advisory published by Apple. This is the first zero-day vulnerability addressed by Apple in 2023. As usual, Apple did not share details about the attacks in the wild exploiting this flaw. Now, the flaw impacts iPhone 8 and later, iPad Pro, all models, iPad Air 3rd generation and later, iPad 5th generation and later, iPad Mini 5th generation and later, and Macs running macOS Ventura. Apple addressed the CVE 2023-23529 flaw with the release of iOS 16.3.1, iPadOS 16.3.1, and macOS Ventura 13.2.1. The company also fixed a use after free issue tracked to CVE 2023-23514 that resides in the kernel. The vulnerability was addressed with improved memory management. Now, an app may be able to execute arbitrary code with kernel privileges, reads the advisory. Now, the vulnerability was reported by Jinru Chi of Pengu Lab and Ned Williamson of Google Project Zero. Researchers from Minerva recently discovered a new evasive malware dubbed Beep, which implements many anti-debugging and anti-sandbox techniques. The name Beep comes from the use of the techniques involved in delaying the execution through the use of the Beep API function. The experts noticed several new samples that were uploaded to VirusTotal as DLL, GIF, and JPEG files. The samples were labeled as Spreader and Detect Debug Environment by VT and were used to drop additional payloads. Once we dug into this sample, we observed the use of a significant amount of evasion techniques. It seemed as if the authors of this malware were trying to implement as many anti-debugging and anti-VM or anti-sandbox techniques as they could find, reads the analysis published by the experts. Now, one such technique involved delaying execution through the use of the Beep API function, hence the malware name. After performing anti-debugging and anti-VM checks, the malware dropper creates a new Windows register key and executes a base64 encoded PowerShell script stored in the value of the key. Now, in return, the PowerShell script retrieves an injector from a remote server, which extracts and launches the payload using the process hollowing injection technique. The attack chain ends by dropping an information stealer on the victim system. It supports multiple commands, some of which are not yet implemented, including whatever the list was. Now, the experts pointed out that once the Beep malware has infected a system, it can be used to spread a wide range of additional malicious payloads in hacking, including ransomware. The new Beep malware efforts to evade detection set it apart from other malware. The sheer number of evasive techniques it implements to avoid sandboxes, VMs, and other debugging techniques is not often seen, concludes the report, which also includes indicators of compromise for the emerging threat. US CISA added the following actively exploited flaws to its known exploited vulnerabilities catalog. The CV 2022-46169, Cacti, which is an open-source platform that provides a robust and extensible operational monitoring and fault management framework for users. The flaw is a command injection vulnerability that can be exploited by the non-authenticated user to execute arbitrary code on a server running Cacti if a specific data source was selected for any monitored device. The flaw resides in the remote agent PHP file that can be accessed by any unauthenticated user. The vulnerability affects versions 1.2.22 and below. CSI orders federal agencies to fix this vulnerability by March 9th, 2023. CVE 2023-21715. The flaw is a Microsoft Office Publisher security feature bypass vulnerability. Microsoft Office Publisher contains a security feature bypass vulnerability which allows for a local authenticated attacker on a targeted system states the description published by CISA. CVE 2023-23376. The flaw is a Windows common log file system driver elevation of privilege vulnerability. An attacker can exploit this vulnerability to gain system privileges. CVE 2023-21823. The vulnerability is a Windows graphics component remote code execution issue. An attacker who successfully exploited this vulnerability could gain system privileges, reads the advisory published by Microsoft. Now, the above flaws in Microsoft products have been addressed with the release of Patch Tuesday security updates for February 2023, and CISA orders federal agencies to fix them by March 7th, 2023. CVE 2023-23529. The vulnerability is a type confusion issue in WebKit that was addressed by the IT giant with approved checks. The flaw impacts iOS, iPadOS, and macOS. An attacker can achieve arbitrary code execution by tricking the victims into visiting maliciously crafted web content. This is the first zero-day vulnerability addressed by Apple, which we just said a couple minutes ago in the Apple story for 2023. CISA orders federal agencies to fix this flaw by March 7th, 2023. According to the Binding Operational Directive 22-01, you know it by now, so I'm not going to repeat it anymore. It's got to be done, got to be fixed, and experts recommend private organizations to review the catalog and address the vulnerabilities in their infrastructure. CISA again. The CISA added actively exploited flaws in Fortra MFT, Intel driver, and TerraMaster NAS, respectively tracked to CVE 2023-0669 and CVE 2015-2291 and CVE 2022-2490 to its known exploited vulnerabilities catalog. CVE 2015-2291 flaw with a CVSS score of version 3 score of 7.8 is a denial of service issue that resides in the Intel Ethernet diagnostics driver for Windows IQVW32.sys and IQVW64.sys. The CVE 2022-24990 flaw is a remote command execution vulnerability in the TerraMaster OS that can allow an unauthenticated user to execute commands on the target endpoint. The issue was also reported in the joint cybersecurity advisory published by the US and South Korean agencies about North Korean apt groups conducting ransomware attacks against healthcare and critical infrastructure facilities to fund their activities using this flaw. The flaw is, again, exploited by North Korea-linked apt groups to gain initial access to the target infrastructure. A CVE 2023-0669 flaw is a remote code injection issue that impacts GoAnywhere MFT, which we talked about last week. The vulnerability can only be exploited by attackers with access to administrative console of the application. Fortra, formerly Help Systems, GoAnywhere MFT contains a pre-authentication remote code execution vulnerability in the license response servlet due to deserializing an attacker-controlled object. Bleeping Computer reported that the Clop ransomware gang claimed to have exploited this vulnerability to steal data from over 130 organizations, according to Binding Operational Directive BOD 2201, you know the deal, and private organizations too. Cisco fixed a critical flaw tracked to CVE 2023-20032 with a CVSS score of 9.8 in the ClamAV Open-Source Antivirus engine. I love ClamAV. The vulnerability resides in the HFS Plus file parser component. An attacker can trigger the issue to gain remote code execution on vulnerable devices or trigger a DDoS condition. Tracked to CVE 2023-20032, the issue relates to, again, a case of remote code execution residing in the HFS file parser. The vulnerability affects versions 1.0.0 and earlier, 0.105.1 and earlier, and 0.103.1 and earlier. The company acknowledged Simon Scannell from Google for reporting the issue. The vulnerability is a buffer overflow issue affecting the ClamAV scanning library. It is due to a missing buffer size check. This vulnerability, again, is due to a missing buffer size check that may result in a heap buffer overflow write. An attacker could exploit this vulnerability by submitting a crafted HFS partition file to be scanned by ClamAV on an affected device. Recent advisory published by Cisco. A successful exploit could allow the attacker to execute arbitrary code with the privileges of the ClamAV scanning process, or else crash the process, resulting in a denial of service condition. Secure Email Gateway, formerly Email Security Appliance, and Secure Email and Web Manager, formerly Security Management Appliance, are not impacted. The IT giant says that there is no workaround for this vulnerability. The good news is that the company product security incident response team is not aware of attacks in the wild exploiting this vulnerability. It's always the good news is we don't know of anybody being attacked. Cisco also addressed another vulnerability tracked to CVE 2023-20052 in the ClamAV engine. The flaw is a possible remote information leak vulnerability in the DMG file parser. The vulnerability affects versions 1.0.0 and earlier, 0.105.1 and earlier, and 0.103.7 and earlier. This vulnerability is due to enabling XML entity substitution that may result in XML external entity injection. An attacker could exploit this vulnerability by submitting a crafted DMG file to be scanned by ClamAV on an affected device. Reads the advisory. A successful exploit could allow the attacker to leak bytes from any file that may be read by the ClamAV scanning process. Citrix released security patches to fix multiple vulnerabilities in virtual apps and desktops and workspace apps for Windows and Linux. The first issue listed in the Support Knowledge Center of the company, tracked to CVE 2023-24483, is a privilege escalation to NT authority system on the vulnerable VDA. A vulnerability has been identified that, if exploited, could result in a local user elevating their privileges level to NT authority system on a Citrix virtual apps and desktops Windows VDA, reads the advisory published by the company. The flaw impacts all virtual apps and desktop versions before 22.12, as well as long-term service release versions 22.03 before CU2 and 19.12 before CU6. Citrix also fixed CVE 2023-24484 and CVE 2023-24485 vulnerabilities in Workspace app for Windows. Both issues can be exploited by attackers with access to the system running a vulnerable version of the Workspace app. The company pointed out that CVE 2023-24485 flaw can be exploited by an attacker with local user access to a system at the time a vulnerable version of Citrix Workspace app for Windows is being installed or uninstalled by an administrator or system process. The two flaws impact workspace app versions before, again, 2212, 2203 LTSR before CU2, and 1912 LTSR before CU7. Hotfix 2. Citrix also addressed a session takeover vulnerability, tracked to CVE 2023-24486, impacting the workspace app for Linux. An attacker can trigger the issue to take over another user session. A vulnerability has been identified in Citrix Workspace app for Linux that, if exploited, may result in a malicious local user being able to gain access to the Citrix virtual apps and desktop session of another user who is using the same computer from which the ICA session is launched. The flaw affects all versions of the Workspace app for Linux before 2202. The U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency published an advisory to warn of attacks that can exploit these vulnerabilities to hack vulnerable systems. The city of Oakland disclosed last week a ransomware attack. We talked about that last week. The security breach began on February 8th, 2023. In an abundance of caution, the city of Oakland has taken impacted systems offline while they work to secure the impacted infrastructure. Now, the Information Technology Department notified local authorities and launched an investigation into the incident to determine the scope and severity of the issue. And the initial notice published by the city confirmed that its core functions, the 911, financial data, and fire emergency resources, were not impacted. However, it warned that the public warned the public of possible delays from the city due to the attack. Now, in an update provided by the city on February 14th, 2023, this is where new information comes in, it declared a local state of emergency due to the effect of the ransomware attack, which is pretty sick. Today, Interim City Administrator G. Harold Duffy issued a local state of emergency due to the ongoing impacts of the network outages resulting from the ransomware attack that began on Wednesday, February 8th. Oakland continues to experience a network outage that has left several non-emergency systems, including phone lines within the city of Oakland, impacted or offline, reads the update published by the city. Now, the declaration allows the city to expedite the procurement of equipment and materials and activate emergency workers when needed, while its experts work to restore its infrastructure and the service it provides. This time, the city has yet to reveal the ransomware family that targeted its infrastructure. So, state of emergency, yeah, okay, sounds really bad, but it's really to give them the ability to trigger processes that allow them to basically buy more equipment or better equipment, hire more companies to help them fix it. The IT department is investigating the incident with the support of a leading forensics firm, of course. It also hired other cybersecurity and technology firms to recover for recovery operations, which again would be part of that state of emergency, I guess, claim. The investigation is still ongoing. This continues to be an ongoing investigation with multiple local, state, and federal agencies involved. It's crazy that you have to declare a state of emergency in order to trigger things like extra access to finances in order to get teams and hardware and software and infrastructure and whatever in place to try to bring your systems back online as a state or city. Now, the Clop ransomware group claims to have stolen sensitive data from over 130 organizations by exploiting a zero-day vulnerability CVE 2023-0669, which we talked about 5 minutes ago, in Fortra GoAnywhere MFT secure file transfer tool, according to Bleeping Computer. Fortra immediately addressed the flaw with the release of emergency security patch and urged customers to install it. While popular investigator Brian Krebs first revealed details about the zero-day on Mastodon and pointed out that Fortra has yet to share the public advisory, GoAnywhere MFT, right? What is it? It's a popular file transfer application. It warned about a zero-day remote code execution exploit. Now, the company said it has temporarily implemented a service outage in response. Krebs wrote on Mastodon, he had to create an account on the service to find this advisory and blah, blah, blah. Now, according to the private advisory published by Fortra, the zero-day is a remote code injection issue that impacts GoAnywhere MFT. The vulnerability can only be exploited by attackers with access to the administrative console of the application, which means these 130 companies were either infected before they were in the network and they were able to access the administrative console from within the network, or the administrative console was reachable over the worldwide interweb. Now, installs of administrative consoles and management interfaces that are not exposed on the internet are safe, unless they have access to your network, of course. However, security research Kevin Beaumont discovered about 1,000 internet-facing consoles. So Fortra recommends GoAnywhere MFT customers to review all administrative users and monitor for unrecognized usernames, especially those created by the system. Now, Clop told Bleeping Computer that they were able to compromise over 130 organizations in just 10 days, but did not share details regarding their claims. Bleeping Computer could not independently confirm Clop's claims, And Fortra has not replied to emails asking for more information regarding the CVE 2023-0669 exploitation and the ransomware group's allegations. The crooks also claimed to have fully compromised the network organizations but did not deploy any ransomware. Multiple experts already released exploits for the CVE 2023-0669 vulnerability. On February 6, 2023, the researcher Florian Hauser of IT security consulting firm Code White released a proof of concept exploit code. Ron Bose, lead security researchers at Rapid7, announced they had merged their exploit for Fortra GoAnywhere MFT into Metasploit, according to their tweet. Researchers at threat intelligence firm Huntress shared findings of their investigation into GoAnywhere MFT exploitation and linked the attacks to the TA505 threat actors. Cloudflare announced it has mitigated a record hyper-volumetric distributed denial-of-service attack that peaked at 71 million requests per second. The company pointed out that this is the largest reported HTTP distribution denial-of-service attack on record. The volume was more than 35% higher than the previously reported record of 46 million requests per second that was mitigated in June 2022 by Google. The attack was part of a series of record-breaking DDoS attacks blocked by Cloudflare during the weekend. This was a weekend of record-breaking DDoS attacks. Over the weekend, Cloudflare detected and mitigated dozens of hyper-volumetric DDoS attacks. The majority of attacks peaked in the ballpark of 50 to 70 million requests per second, with the largest exceeding 71 million requests per second, recent post published by Cloudflare. This is the largest reported HTTP DDoS attack on record, more than 35% higher than blah, blah, blah from Google. The HTTP2-based attacks originated from over 30,000 IP addresses and aimed at popular gaming provider, cryptocurrency companies, hosting providers, and cloud computing platforms. The experts added that the DDoS attacks originated from numerous cloud providers. Cloudflare is working with them to dismantle the botnet behind the malicious traffic. Cloudflare states that over the past year, they have observed a growing number of distributed denial-of-service attacks originating from cloud computing providers. For this reason, the company will provide service providers that own their own autonomous systems with a free botnet threat feed. The feed will provide service providers threat intelligence about their own IP space. Now, the experts explained that the attacks that were mitigated during the weekend are not related to campaigns launched by pro-Russia Killnet group that targeted healthcare websites. The company added that the attacks are related to the U.S. Super Bowl. The experts warned that the size, sophistication, and frequency of distributed denial-of-service attacks has been increasing over the past months. In the latest DDoS threat report published by Cloudflare, the company estimated that the amount of HTTP DDoS attacks increased by 79% year over year. The amount of volumetric attacks exceeding 100 gigabytes per second grew by 67% quarter over quarter, and the number of attacks lasting more than 3 hours increased by 87%. The audacity of attackers has been increasing as well. In our latest DDoS threat report, we saw that ransom DDoS attacks steadily increased throughout the year. They peaked in November 2022, where 1 out of every 4 surveyed customers reported being subject to ransomware DDoS attacks and threats, concluded the report. Community Health Systems, or CHS, is one of the nation's leading healthcare providers. Which nation? I'm assuming the United States. CHS operates 79 acute care hospitals and more than 1,000 other sites of care, including physician practices, urgent care centers, freestanding emergency departments, occupational medicine clinics, imaging centers, cancer centers, and ambulatory surgery centers. Community Health Systems was the victim of a cyber attack. Threat actors exploited the recently disclosed zero-day vulnerability CVE 2023-0669 in Fortra GoAnywhere MFT secure file transfer platform. Way to go, CHS. Community Healthcare Systems was recently notified by its third-party provider, Fortra, that Fortra had experienced a security incident that exposed company data. CHS launched an investigation to determine whether any of its systems were affected and discovered that up to 1 million patients were impacted. Upon receiving notification of the security breach, the company promptly launched an investigation, including to determine whether any company information systems were affected, whether there was any impact on ongoing operations, and whether and to what extent PHI and PI had been unlawfully accessed by the attacker. Reads an 8K form filed with the SEC. While that investigation is still ongoing, the company believes that the Fortra breach has not had any impact on any of the company information systems, that there has not been any material interruption of the company business operations, including the delivery of patient care. With regard to the PHI and PI, with personally identifiable information or personal information comprised by the Fortra breach, the company currently estimates that approximately 1 million individuals may have been affected by this attack. company will offer protection services and notify all impacted individuals whose information was exposed in the data breach. Last week, the Clop ransomware gang again told Bleeping Computer that they were able to compromise over 130 organizations, and here we have one such organization that we're not sure if it's Clop or not, but it's definitely through this vulnerability. The crooks also claim, so that's Clop again. If you didn't watch it, then it was mentioned 2 or 3 times already. So, researchers at threat intelligence firm Huntress shared findings of their investigation into the GoAnywhere MFT exploitation. Again, we talked about this, and linked the attacks to the TA505 threat actor, so it could be Clop, could be TA505. Last week, CISA also added the GoAnywhere MFT flaw to its known exploited vulnerabilities, so it's definitely something that if you have it, you should be patching it. A malware campaign conducted by alleged Russian threat actors has been targeting users in Eastern Europe in the crypto industry. The attackers are sending out emails with fake job opportunities as bait in an attempt to trick victims into installing Enigma information stealing malware. This sounds very, very familiar, and if you think it does sound familiar, this has happened very recently in the past. They were sending out job opportunities to like developers and people in cryptocurrency to get them to install info stealers. The attackers used multiple highly obfuscated and under development custom loaders to deliver the Enigma stealer. The attacker also exploits the CVE 2015-2291 flaw in the Intel driver to conduct bring your own BYOVD attacks and reduce the token integrity of Microsoft Defender. Enigma is a modified version of the Stealarium info stealer, which is an open source C# based malware that also supports Clipper and keylogger features. The attack chain starts with phishing emails or social media messages distributing a RAR archive. The archive contains 2 files, interviewquestions.txt and interviewconditions.word.exe. The files pose an interview for a fake cryptocurrency role or job opening. One file, interviewquestions.txt, contains sample interview questions written in Cyrillic. This serves to further legitimize the package in the eyes of the victim and draw attention away from the malicious binary. Here's the analysis published by Trend Micro. The other file, interview conditions.word.exe, contains the first stage Enigma loader. This file, which also masquerades as a legitimate Word document, is designed to lure unsuspecting victims into executing the loader. Once executed, the Enigma loader begins the registration and downloading of the second stage payload. Experts observed Enigma stealer using 2 servers in its operation. The first utilizes Telegram for delivering payloads, sending commands and receiving the payload at heartbeat. The second server is used for DevOps and logging purposes. The malicious payload sends its execution log to the logging server. Upon opening said Microsoft Word document, the first stage Enigma loader is launched, which in turn downloads and executes an obfuscated secondary stage payload through Telegram. Now, to download the next stage payload, the malware first sends a request to the attacker-controlled Telegram channel to obtain the file path. This approach allows the attacker to continuously update and eliminates reliance on fixed file names, continues the report. Now, the second stage malware, updat-task.dll, is a dynamic link library written in C++ that includes 2 export functions, DLL entry point and entry. This payload disables Microsoft Defender through the BYOVD technique. Through the exploitation of the CVE 2015-2291 flaw, then the malware downloads and executes the third stage payload, which in turn downloads the Enigma stealer. The European Union Agency for CyberSecurity and CERT-EU warned of multiple China-linked threat actors targeting businesses and government organizations in the EU. The joint report focused on cyber activities conducted by multiple Chinese advanced persistent threat groups, including AP27, AP30, AP31, Key3 Chang, Gallium, and Mustang Panda. The EU Cybersecurity Agency and the CERT for the UA institutions, bodies, and agencies would like to draw the attention of their respective audiences on particular advanced persistent threats known as, again, AP27, 31, Key3 Chang, Gallium, Mustang Panda. These threat actors have been recently conducting malicious cyber activities against business and governments in the Union. These threat actors present important and ongoing threats to the European Union. Recent operations pursued by these threat actors focused mainly on information theft, primarily via establishing persistent footholds within the network infrastructure of organizations or strategic alliance. The European agencies are calling for all public and private sector organizations in the EU to apply the recommendations provided in the alert. The alert urges organizations to improve their cybersecurity posture and increase their resilience to cyber attacks. The report also provides recommendations to improve the response to the incident. Organizations are urged to create and maintain an incident response plan and assess the incident severity. The document also includes an overview of the China-linked threat actors that are targeting EU organizations. Phylum researchers spotted more than 451 unique Python packages on the official Python package index, or PyPI repository, in an attempt to deliver Clipper malware on the developer systems. According to the experts, the activity is still ongoing and is part of a malicious campaign that they discovered on November 2022, or in November 2022. Since there's no day there, it should be on. Anyway, threat actors have typo squatted several major packages in PyPI. The researchers reported that the attackers are trying to register the same code in every possible simple typo of a package name. The process is simple and easy to automate. Phylum pointed out that the obfuscation technique used in these packages is significantly different from the packages they have spotted in November 2022. Now, upon installing a malicious package, JavaScript file is dropped to the system and executed in the background of any web browsing session, allowing to replace a cryptocurrency address with the attacker address every time a developer copies it. Ultimately, this code is attempting to do exactly what was discovered in November blog post, and that is quietly replace any crypto wallet address copied to the user clipboard with the attacker-controlled wallet addresses. Read the analysis published by Phylum. It does that by creating a browser extension and then writes the following JavaScript to the extension. The malware establishes persistence by instructing the developer browsers to load this extension anytime a browser is open. The Clipper malware targets popular web browsers including Google Chrome, Microsoft Edge, Brave, and Opera. The malware modifies browsers. Firefox is not in there. It's not a popular browser. Anyway, the malware modifies browser shortcuts to load the extension by launching the software with load extension command line. This attacker significantly increased their footprint in PyPI through automation. Flooding the ecosystem with packages like this will continue, concludes the report. The use of Chinese characters or any other Unicode plain, for that matter, is an easy misdirection to detect and to dismiss. Cybersecurity firm FortiNAC has released security updates to address two critical vulnerabilities in FortiNAC and FortiWeb solutions. The two vulnerabilities tracked as CVE 2022-39952 and CVE 2021-42756 are respectively an external control of file name or path in FortiNAC and a collection of stack-based buffer overflow issues in proxy daemon for FortiWeb. CVE 2022-39952 flaw with a CVSS score of 9.8 is an external control of file name or path in the key upload scriptlet of FortiNAC. The vulnerability was internally discovered and reported by Gwendol Guignard of Fortinet Product Security Team. An external control of file name or path vulnerability, CWE73, in FortiNAC web server may allow an unauthenticated attacker to perform arbitrary writes on the system. FortiNAC version 9.4.0, FortiNAC version 9.2.0 through 9.2.5, 9.1.0 through all of these other versions are affected. Now the CV 2022-39552 vulnerability is fixed for FortiNAC 9.4.1 and later, 9.2.6, 9.1.8 and later, and 7.2.0 and later. Now the second vulnerability tracked to CVE 2021-42756 with the CVS version 3 score of 9.3 affects FortiWeb. The issue was internally discovered and reported by Giuseppe Cocomazzi of Fortinet Product Security Team. Multiple stack-based buffer overflow vulnerabilities, which is CWE 121, in FortiWeb proxy daemon may allow an unauthenticated remote attacker to achieve arbitrary code execution via specifically crafted or specially crafted HTTP requests. Now, affected products are FortiWeb versions 5.x, all versions, version 6.0.7 and below, 6.1.2 and below, 6.2.6 and below, 6.3.16 and below, and 6.4 all versions. Broadcom. Broadcom Symantec researchers have spotted a new malware tracked as Frebnis. They're running out of names. That abuses Microsoft Internet Information Services to deploy Freb in an IIS, whatever. Deploy a backdoor and monitor all HTTP traffic to the infected system, Symantec reports. The malicious code was employed in attacks against targets in Taiwan by a currently unknown threat actor. Frebn IIS operates by injecting code into the memory of the IIS freb.dll. Hey, there's the name, which is used by the IIS feature failed request event buffering for troubleshooting failed requests. The technique used by Frebnis involves injecting malicious code into the memory of a DLL file. We just said that, related to an IIS feature used to troubleshoot and analyze failed web page requests. This allows the malware to stealthily monitor all HTTP requests and recognize specially formatted HTTP requests sent by the attacker, allowing for remote code execution. Reads a report published by Symantec. In order to use this technique, an attacker needs to gain access to the Windows system running the IIS server, which is not very difficult, by some other means. In this particular case, it is unclear how this access was achieved. The IIS feature failed request event buffering collects data and details about requests such as HTTP headers with cookies, the originating IP address, and port. Now, a feature called failed request tracing can be used to troubleshoot IIS failed requests. The Frebin IIS ensures failed request tracing is enabled as part of the attack, then accesses w3wp.exe process memory, obtaining the address of where the failed request event buffering code is loaded. Once hackers obtain the code start address for the function, the Frebin IIS malware searches from there for a function pointer to able to hijack code execution and achieve the execution of its malicious code. Now, the authors of this Frebnis have determined that a particular function pointer within IIS-freb.dll is called by IIS-core.dll whenever any HTTP request is made to IIS from a web client. Frebnis hijacks this function by injecting its own malicious code into IIS process memory and then replacing this function pointer with the address of its own malicious code. Frebnis parses all requests from login.aspx or default.aspx with a specific parameter password, which allows it to decrypt and execute .NET code when a password match is found. The malicious code parses all received HTTP post requests from, again, the login and the default.aspx, along with the parameter password is set to. Now, upon matching the password, the malware decrypts and executes the main backdoor included in a section of the injected code. Backdoor is a .NET executable code. Access pointed out that the malware doesn't save executables to disk. This makes it completely stealthy. Now, the backdoor implements proxying functionality and remote code execution. On Thursday, the websites of several German airports were unreachable. Experts launched an investigation speculating a possible cyber attack on a large scale against the critical infrastructure. Ralph Beisel, chief executive at the ADV Airport Association, confirmed that the websites were hit by a DDoS attack. She added, Ralph? Ralph is a she? She added that other systems at the airports were not impacted. Once again, airports fell victim to large-scale DDoS attacks, Beisel said in a statement. According to the information we have so far, other systems are not affected. The alleged cyber attack took place a day after an IT failure caused cancellations and delays for thousands of passengers of Germany national carrier Lufthansa at Frankfurt Airport. Administrators at the airport confirmed that the problems were likely caused by malicious traffic. We're still troubleshooting, a spokeswoman for Dortmund Airport said, adding it was unlikely that the failure was due to a regular overload, reported the website DW. There is reason to suspect it would be, or it could be, a hacker attack. In early January, pro-Russian group Killnet launched DDoS attacks against the websites of German airports, administrative bodies, and banks. The attacks are the hacktivists' response to the German government decision to send Leopard 2 tanks to the Ukraine. Chancellor Olaf Scholz announced the decision to send 14 tanks and allow other countries to send theirs too, which was restricted until now under export regulations. At a cabinet meeting on Wednesday, February 16th, the group called to action on its Telegram channel against the German airports. In October, the pro-Russian hacktivist group Killnet claimed responsibility for massive DDoS attacks against the websites of several major airports in the U.S. Web hosting company GoDaddy announced that attackers have stolen source code and installed malware on its servers. The threat actors have breached its cPanel shared hosting environment. The company states that it is not able to determine the timing of the initial compromise. Oh boy. However, it is still investigating the breach to determine the root cause of the incident. Oh, you still don't even know what happened. You don't know when it happened or what happened. Now, the malware installed on the systems of the company was intermittently redirecting random customer websites to malicious sites. The security breach was discovered in December 2022 after a customer reported that their sites were being used to redirect to random domains. The company believes that it was the victim of an attack conducted by a sophisticated threat actor. It also added that the attacks have not impacted their business or operations. No, it's affected all of your customers' business and operations, but not yours. The web hosting company revealed to have evidence linking the threat actors to the attacks to other web hosting providers worldwide over the years. We are working with multiple law enforcement agencies around the world in addition to the forensics experts to further investigate the issue. We have evidence, and law enforcement has confirmed that this incident was carried out by a sophisticated and organized group targeting hosting services like GoDaddy. There is a statement from the company. According to the information we have received, their apparent goal is to infect websites and servers with malware for phishing campaigns, malware distribution, and other malicious activities. According to the company, the attack is part of a multi-year campaign that was the cause of data breaches disclosed in November 2021, which impacted 1.2 million customers, and March 2020, which exposed data of 28,000 customers. In December 2022, an unauthorized third party gained access to and installed malware on our cPanel hosting servers. The malware intermittently redirected random customer websites to malicious sites. Reads a Form 10-K filed with the SEC. Based on investigation, we believe these incidents are part of a multi-year campaign by a sophisticated threat actor group that, among other things, stole malware on our systems and obtained pieces of code related to some services within GoDaddy. The company announced that it will continue to invest to secure its infrastructure, but warns that threat actors are becoming even more aggressive and sophisticated, and that current geopolitical situation is worsening the situation. Which means what? You don't believe you can protect your systems? Sounds like a cop-out to me. A group of hackers called SiegeSec recently published on its Telegram channel a JSON file containing data belonging to thousands of Atlassian employees and floor plans for 2 of the company offices. The employee file posted online contains more than 13,200 entries, and a cursory review of the file appears to show multiple current employees' data, including names, email addresses, work departments, and other information, reported CyberScoop. The following plans are for one floor of the company's San Francisco office and another for its Sydney, Australia office. The threat actors used the stolen employee credentials to steal data from a third-party vendor. The company pointed out that the incident did not impact network or customer information. No, it just exposed 13,000 employees' information. That's right, folks. SiegeSec here to announce we have hacked the software company Atlassian, actually a third-party vendor of theirs, but okay. This company worth $44 billion has been pawned by the Fury hackers UWU. I'm not saying that's how they sound, but whatever, it makes it more fun. Who knew gay furries could do such a thing? Whatever. Okay, so we're looking at thousands of employee records as well as a few building floor plans. These employee records contain email addresses, phone numbers, names, and lots more. Blah, blah, blah. The story is ours, and it is done by hackers. SiegeSec would like to formally say thank you to Atlassian for providing us with this data. Okay, teasing them, whatever. Bottom line is not very good for Atlassian. Now, on February 15, 2023, they learned that data from Envoy, a third-party app that Atlassian uses to coordinate in-office resources, was compromised and published. Atlassian spokesperson Megan Sutton told TechCrunch Atlassian product and customer data was not accessible. Now, on the other side, Envoy declared that they have not suffered a security breach and argued that the attackers have likely stolen the credentials from an Atlassian employee and then used them to access data used by Envoy. So they phished the credentials from some Atlassian employee and used those credentials to, I don't want to say, they didn't hack it, they just used the credentials to access the system. Anyway, a hacker gained access to an Atlassian employee valid credentials to pivot and access the Atlassian employee directory and office floor plans held within the Envoy app. Envoy spokesperson April Marks told TechCrunch. After the Envoy denial, Atlassian added that its internal investigation has revealed that attackers had actually compromised its data from the Envoy app using Atlassian employee credentials that had been mistakenly posted in a public repository by the employee. Oh, that's even worse. So it's not phishing. This poor soul at Atlassian published credentials to a public repository. Anyway, car makers Hyundai and Kia are rolling out an emergency update for the software shipped with several car models. The update addresses a bug that can be exploited by thieves to steal the impacted vehicles. The anti-theft software upgrade rolled out by the company aims at preventing the vehicles from starting during a method of theft that was shared on TikTok and other social media channels. In response to increasing thefts targeting its vehicles without push-button ignitions and mobilizing anti-theft devices in the United States, Hyundai is introducing a free anti-theft software upgrade to prevent the vehicles from starting during a method of theft popularized on TikTok and other social media channels. The videos shared on TikTok, known as Kia Challenge, show how to remove the steering column cover to access a USB-A slot that can be used to connect to the car. The access to the slot can allow attackers to exploit the flaw to bypass the immobilizer that validates the code in the key transponder to the car ECU. The software update will be released as a service campaign for a total of almost 4 million vehicles beginning in February. Carmaker will first upgrade the software shipped with more than 1 million models from 2017 to 2020. Elantras, 2015 to 2019, Sonatas, and 2020 to 21 Venue vehicles. The upgrade will be performed by Hyundai dealers, and the carmaker ensures that the process will take less than 1 hour to be completed. Wait a second. You want to upgrade 4 million vehicles 1 hour at a time? Yeah, okay, good luck with that. The car makers will reimburse the purchase of steering wheel locks to the owners of some 2011 to 2022 model year vehicles without engine immobilizers that cannot install the software upgrade. Thank you. While the Kia challenge was becoming viral, law enforcement observed a surge in the theft of impacted car models in the U.S. In Los Angeles, the thefts of these vehicles increased by 85% in 2022 compared to the previous year. In September 2022, a national class action lawsuit was filed in federal court in Orange County, California, against the car makers for this flaw. The lawsuit blames Kia and Hyundai's for building vehicles without engine immobilizers, allowing cars to be hot-wired and stolen. The complaint states that, unlike any other car makers, Kia and Hyundai did not use this protection system over the past 20 years. Hyundai is committed to ensuring the quality and integrity of our products through continuous improvement and is pleased to provide affected customers with an additional theft deterrent through this software upgrade that takes an hour and needs to be done to 4 million cars. We have prioritized the upgrade availability for owners and lessees of our highest selling vehicles and those most targeted by thieves in order for dealers to service them first. According to the United States Department of Transportation, approximately 3.8 million Hyundai vehicles and 4.5 million Kia vehicles are impacted by this flaw. So you got 8.3 million cars 1 hour at a time. Microsoft Patch Tuesday security updates for February 2023 fixed 75 vulnerabilities in multiple products, including Microsoft Windows and Windows Components, Office and Office Components, Exchange Server, Net Core, and Visual Studio Code, 3D Builder and Print 3D, Microsoft Azure and Dynamics 365 Defender for IoT, and the Malware Protection Engine, and Microsoft Edge, Chromium-based. 9 vulnerabilities addressed this month have been rated critical and 66 are rated important in severity. None of the vulnerabilities addressed this month are listed as publicly known, but 3 flaws are listed as being exploited in the wild at the time of disclosure. The most severe actively exploited flaw is tracked to CVE 2023-21823. It is a Windows graphics component remote code execution vulnerability. The flaw, rated as important severity with CVS score of 7.8, was reported by Genwai Zhang and Danesh Kizhakanan of Mandiant. An attacker who successfully exploited this vulnerability could gain system privileges, reads the advisory published by Microsoft. Another actively exploited issue is a Microsoft Office security feature bypass vulnerability tracked to CVE 2023-21715. The flaw, rated as important in severity with a CVS score of 7.3, was reported by Hide Take Joe. The attack itself is carried out locally by a user with authentication to the targeted system. An authenticated attacker could exploit the vulnerability by convincing a victim through social engineering to download and open a specially crafted file from a website, which could lead to a local attack on the victim's computer, reads the advisory published by Microsoft. An attacker who successfully exploited this vulnerability could bypass Office macro policies used to block untrusted or malicious files. Another interesting flaw addressed this month is a Windows Common Log File System Driver Elevation of Privilege vulnerability tracked to CVE 2023-23376. An attacker can exploit this vulnerability to gain system privileges. This vulnerability is actively exploited too. It was discovered by Microsoft Threat Intelligence Center. Now, the full list of vulnerabilities released by Microsoft for February is available on their site, of course. Palo Alto Network's Unit 42 researchers reported that Mirai variant called V3G4 was attempting to exploit several flaws to infect IoT devices from July to December 2022. The threat actor's goal is to infect the largest number of systems as possible to compose a botnet that can be used to conduct multiple attacks, including DDoS attacks. The researchers have observed 3 different Mirai V3G4 campaigns likely operated by the same threat actor for the following reasons. Now, the botnet exploited 13 vulnerabilities to achieve remote code execution on vulnerable devices. Upon a successful exploitation, the malicious code executes wget and curl utilities to download Mirai botnet from attackers' infrastructure and then execute it. Upon execution, the bot prints slice Vega to the console. The experts noticed that the V3G4 also supports a function that makes sure only one instance of its malware is executing on the compromised device. If a botnet process already exists, the botnet client will exit. The botnet also attempts to terminate a list of processes, including the hard-coded stop list, by checking their names on the infected device. Unlike most Mirai variants, the V3G4 variant uses different XOR encryption keys for string encryption. The researchers also noticed that the bot samples from the 3 campaigns have minor differences. The original Mirai botnet's sample spreads itself by brute forcing weak telnet and SSH credentials, while other variants rely on brute force attacks and embed exploits to spread. However, bot samples discovered between September and December 2022 don't contain the functions of vulnerability exploitation and brute force of credentials. The vulnerabilities mentioned above have less attack complexity than previously observed variants, but they maintain a critical security impact that can lead to remote code execution. Now, once the attacker gains control of a vulnerable device in his manner, they could take advantage by including the newly compromised devices in their botnet to conduct further attacks, again like DDoS. Therefore, it's highly recommended that patches and updates are applied when possible. Now, since December 2022, Cisco Talos researchers have been observing an unidentified financially motivated threat actor deploying 2 new malware, the recently discovered Mortal Kombat ransomware, and a Go variant of the Laplace Clipper malware. The threat actor is scanning the internet for systems with an exposed remote desktop protocol, RDP, port 3389. Similarities in code, class name, and registry key strings led the experts into assessing with high confidence that the Mortal Kombat ransomware belongs to the Exorist family. The malware campaign is targeting individuals, small businesses, and large organizations with the end goal of stealing or demanding ransom payments in cryptocurrency. Most of the victims are located in the U.S., but experts observed limited infections in the United Kingdom, Turkey, and the Philippines. Threat actors also use a multi-stage attack chain that begins with a phishing email with a zip attachment containing a bat loader script. The initial infection vector is a phishing email in which the attackers impersonate Coin Payments, a legitimate global cryptocurrency payment gateway. Additionally, the emails have a spoofed sender email, no reply at coinpayments.net, and the email subject, coinpayments.net payment timed out, reads the analysis published by Cisco Talos. A malicious zip file is attached with a file name resembling a transaction ID mentioned in the email body, enticing the recipient to unzip the malicious attachment and view the contents, which is a malicious bat loader. Upon opening the script, it downloads another malicious zip file from a remote server and executes the payload, which is either the Go variant of Laplace Clipper malware or Mortal Kombat ransomware. The drop payload is executed as a process in the victim machine, while the downloaded and dropped malicious files are deleted by the attackers to cover their tracks. Mortal Kombat first appeared on the threat landscape in January 2023. It targets various files on victim machine file systems such as system application, database backup, and virtual machine files, as well as files in the remote locations mapped as logical drives. Unlike other ransomware families, Mortal Kombat did not show any wiper behavior or delete the volume shadow copies on the infected system. It corrupts Windows Explorer, removes applications and folders from the Windows startup, and disables the run command window, making the system inoperable. The ransom note instructs the victim to contact the attacker through the QTOX instant messaging application. Technical analysis of the malware, along with indicators of compromise, are included in the report published by Talos. Researchers from Census reported that more than 500 hosts have been infected in a new wave of ESXi ARGS ransomware attacks, most of which are in France, Germany, Netherlands, and the UK. Over the last few days, Census has observed just over 500 hosts newly infected with ESXi ARGS ransomware, most of which are in France, Germany, and Netherlands, and UK. Here's a report published by the experts. During analysis, they discovered 2 hosts with strikingly similar ransom notes dating back to mid-October 2022, just after ESXi version 6.5 and 6.7 reached end of life. Census reported that 2 hosts with a similar but different ransom note were infected on October 12, 2022. Then, on January 31st, threat actors updated the same 2 October 2022 hosts with a ransom note similar to the current campaign on port 443. Now, the attackers replaced the Tux chat ID with an onion URL in the ransom note. They also added a Proton mail address at the bottom of the note. Experts also noticed that the amount of ransom demanded by the attackers to the victims passed from 2.09 to 1.05 bitcoins. Starting from February 2nd, 2023, the researchers observed thousands of systems compromised with this ransomware. A week later, on February 8th, attackers changed their encryption methods and ransom notes on every compromised host. The changes aim to make it much harder to recover the encrypted virtual machines. The new encryption process implemented in the most recent attacks allows the ransomware to encrypt more data in large files. So the timeline suggests that attackers initially tested their attack chain on a select few hosts. Each variant of the ransom notes from October 2022 through February 2023 are strikingly similar in wording to the note of an earlier ransom variant, Cheers Crypt, which gained notoriety in early 2022. While they may share a similar ransom note, researchers have determined that they have different encryption methods, meaning they are likely associated with different groups. Census has developed a dashboard to track ESXi ARG's ransomware infections worldwide. Data in the dashboard is aggregated once every 24 hours at midnight. The company pointed out that it does not include host names, virtual hosts, or hosts behind proxies that require a name-based request. There may be slight differences from what is found in search.census.io with virtual hosts enabled, states the company. The good news is that the number of the new compromises decreased since its peak reached on February 12th, 2023. Maybe they're just getting their second wind like I am. During the last months of Tor, users have experienced Tor network performance issues lately. Tor project maintainers explained that they were caused by different waves of ongoing DDoS attacks. Tor project executive director Isabella Diaz-Fernandez explained that the methods and targets of the attacks are continuously changing over time. She also added that at this time, or this moment, it's not possible to attribute the attacks to certain threat actors. For at least 7 months, several different types of ongoing denial-of-service attacks have affected the Tor network. At some points, the attacks impacted the network severely enough that users could not load pages or access Onion services. We have been working hard to mitigate the impacts and defend the network from these attacks. The methods and targets of these networks or of these attacks have changed over time, and we are adapting as these attacks continue. It's not possible to determine with certainty who is conducting these attacks on or their intentions. In many cases, users were not able to access the Tor network and faced important delays while attempting to load pages. Diaz added that the Tor project is working to improve defenses of the Tor network and mitigate these attacks. They're also adding 2 new members to their network team who will be focused on .onion services development. To date, Twitter has offered 3 methods of two-factor authentication: text message, authentication app, and security key. However, the company has announced that it will limit the use of SMS-based two-factor authentication only to its blue subscribers, which is a crime, in my opinion. The move is the response of the company to the use of abuse of the authentication method by threat actors. That's not a reason. It's just one more way for you to try to make money and make this business viable. I think more and more people are going to go to other places like Mastodon, and Twitter is just going to become, I don't know, the junk of the last 10 years. So, while historically a popular form of two-factor authentication, unfortunately, we have seen phone number-based two-factor authentication be used and abused by bad actors. Well, so has email. So has every other process. Reads the post. I'm angry, in case you haven't noticed. Reads the post published by the social media and social networking service. So, starting today, we'll no longer allow accounts to enroll in a text message SMS method of two-factor authentication unless they are Twitter Blue subscribers, meaning you have to pay. The availability... Paying doesn't change the fact that people are going to abuse the SMS two-factor authentication. I don't get it. The availability of the text message two-factor authentication for Twitter Blue may vary by country and carrier. Now, non-Twitter Blue subscribers that are using the text message SMS method of two-factor authentication will have 30 days to enroll in another authentication method. After 20th of March 2023, we will no longer permit non-Twitter Blue subscribers to use text messages as a two-factor authentication method. Continues the statement. At that time, accounts with text message two-factor authentication still enabled will have it disabled. So they're going to forcibly turn off your two-factor authentication unless you change it. Disabling text message two-factor authentication does not automatically disassociate your phone number from Twitter account. Oh, so your account still exists, but is no longer secure. Great. And that's the news. Thanks again for watching. Don't forget to share and subscribe if you haven't already, and smash the bell if you haven't already. And I'll see you on the next episode. Take care.
Don't forget to ride. Farewell.